Project Hug. Yeah, they want to hug the developers and bring them closer in Google's loving arms and make sure that they don't go build their own apps.
This is like the hug from your grandmother almost suffocates you when you really just have trauma from it.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Metacast Roundtable by Naavik. This is the one podcast to stay up to date with all the latest game business news and how they impact the future of games. I really hope that your winter holiday is going to be like mine. You're going to get under a very cozy blanket, get a hot chocolate, and listen to the Metacast. That's exactly.
Don't forget to bring some cats or steal your neighbor's cats.
Yes.
They're cozy.
I'm allergic to cats.
Get out.
No.
You've heard their voices. Today I'm joined by Matt Dion, lead product manager at EA and also writer at Naavik, David Amor, CEO of Playment, Maria Mejerwall, game advisor within game development and esports. Marie's joining us for the first time today. Hey.
Hey, Marie.
Hey.
Welcome.
Hello.
How's it going?
Hello.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for
With
being
these
here.
veterans, hopefully carrying me through this episode.
Yeah, we can be like a Call of Duty squad. I'll just be dying and you have to keep reviving me.
Oh, that's not good for a host.
Oh, yeah, I guess not.
Yeah, you're the anchor. Come on.
So I always like to ask a really random question to new guests. And I've been asking about pets that you like to pet in game. But I thought today to enter the Christmas spirit because I started wrapping gifts this week and I realized how much I suck at it.
What?
And so I was wondering, Marie, what's your favorite present wrapping technique? Do you use paper? Do you use bags? Or do you just like wrap it in fabric?
It depends. If it's like something super exclusive and small, then I'll just like put it in a box and then I'll have some of this like semi-transparent, just colored paper around it that you just kind of fold it around.
Oh, wow.
If something bigger, then I like to take some silvery wrapping paper and I like to do a lot of like diagonals and stuff and funky business and get everything, all my angles perfectly online and then be very creative, like the whatever sort of tire or whatever decoration you put on it needs to be unique. They all need to be unique. They all need to stand out. And then I usually do some calligraphy notes on it as well, and maybe a little poem or something. I like to put a high bar.
Can we all agree this is unusual quality of wrapping, right? I'm feeling very self-conscious.
It's a thought that counts, but how nice isn't it to get like a really good Christmas present? Someone really put their time. Because what I feel today is people are giving up material things, but it's the thought that counts. It's like the love you put in it is how much you thought about, this thing, really fitting you and having a thought behind it. So, I think those things are as valuable as the gift itself.
I'm feeling very ashamed about my present wrapping at home now.
Marie seems like a good person. This, what are we, 2 minutes in? She seems like a good person.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean,
I just
Maria,
like
you've at least
happy.
Maria, you've at least started wrapping your gifts. I haven't even started shopping yet. So
I know. Well,
you're way
Matt,
ahead.
it is as we record this, 23rd of November. So you're the weird ones. Maria's the weird one.
To be fair, like I live so far from my family now, so it's probably only kind of few presents that I don't just send straight from Amazon, and those I do have the time to wrap. So there's also that.
I'd be more comfortable if we move on from this conversation, please. I'm not feeling good.
Well, we've been
We can get into the stuff.
So the main topics we're going to be discussing today is Blizzard not renewing the contract with NetEase for being their agent in mainland China and everything that means about it, the rumors of what Blizzard will do next with that market, and also how Google struck deals to prevent big app developers from competing in the Play Store. Yeah, really, really curious to dive into that one.
Both topics are pretty gossipy, aren't they? Maria, I don't think you're very comfortable in the world of gossip, but I think we should lean into it. That's where the fun is, isn't it?
It's a couple, I must say, there's a couple of things in today's episode where I have to kind of be careful with my words because I'm under NDA with a couple of these companies, So I gotta be like, wait, let me just Google if this is public information or not.
Let's get Marie drunk and see if she'll spill some.
We We should have Amazoned with a really nice gift wrap.
There you go.
Some wine.
Bribe always works, right? Google.
Exactly.
But as we've been doing nowadays, we're just going to go through some key updates before jumping into the discussions. And there seems to be a pattern where I take the first update. I'll have to change this around. Anyway, it's Gameloft's successful expansion into PC and console. So in the third quarter of 2022, Gameloft's revenue was up by 48% compared to the same period in 2021. And Gameloft, as you know, is a respectable mobile game developer with hit titles such as Asphalt. So you may be asking, how did they grow their revenue by 48%? And what can I do to match that? Well, so they released Disney Dreamlight Valley, which is their first major title to debut on PC and all major console platforms. And they pivoted their strategy to become a cross-platform studio around January 2019, because at the time, their statement said that they saw that the high-end market on mobile was not as dynamic and as profitable as it had been. And they were considering potentially moving into hyper-casual, but decided to lean into the high-quality premium games that they're used to developing. And honestly, it's just proving as a really good bet for the studio. Being able to show this trend of growth in a market that's been showing decline in earnings, struggling across the board. I think there's a lot of interesting takeaways if you want to dig into it further.
Yeah, well,
I can provide a small comment on that one. Like, I think there's been like the big, like free-to-play wave is still like here, right? But there's enough people who are tired of it who also want a couple of these premium high-quality games. And I think that's where Gameloft can come in, because they have so much experience with doing that, so they can actually provide that.
Yeah, honestly, looking at Google bringing privacy changes in the midterm future, I think in a couple of years, there's still a continuation of iOS post IDFA challenges. Mobile phones technically are becoming powerful and could even be compared to Switch. So there's a gap that's bridging between the talent that develops mobile games with the talent that develops console games. And also seeing that accessing cross-platform game dev tech is just becoming more accessible. I honestly believe that we'll see more mobile-first studios going into a cross-platform portfolio to mitigate these risks.
Just real quick, has anyone actually played the game here, the Disney Dreamlight Valley? I thought it looked really, really clever.
I didn't play it, but I watched a lot of videos. I went into a rabbit hole of YouTube.
What do you think?
It looks amazing. Yeah.
Do you, as somebody that makes driving games, did you have driving game envy?
It's not. This is a life sim game where you're living amongst the Disney and Pixar friends.
I was still picturing Asphalt 9 for some reason.
But they are doing a console Disney racing game. That looks pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I always really look up to what Gameloft does in terms of racing. They have their own engine as well that gives them a competitive advantage, and I'm really curious to see it in practice on console and PC.
I think we'll see more of it. I know that PlayStation also is starting to invest in mobile first studios. So I think we'll see a little bit of renaissance coming on in the next couple of years of premium games in mobile.
Yeah, and actually that ties really nicely into Matt's update about generative AI and how that could potentially lead more of the studios to be able to pursue the high quality of these, AA games. Is that how you describe them?
Sure, yeah. I think the takeaway here that we'll come to, which you're sort of alluding to, is sort of an upcoming democratization of game development, which I think is really interesting. But anyways, the update here is that Andreessen Horowitz Games Fund put out a piece called Generative. I think this is the title. Generative AI is the biggest thing to happen to the game industry since 3D. Sorry, that's a quote from the piece, not the actual title. This was written by James Gortzman, who's a general partner at the Games Fund, and Jack Soslow, who also does investing at the Games Fund. And they are reviewing a lot of the recent developments in generative AI and making some predictions about where this is going to go. So they walk through a few key assumptions that sort of underlie their thinking here. They're saying the amount of research being done in AI is continuing to grow. Of all entertainment, games are going to be most impacted by generative AI. They're predicting the price of content will continue to drop dramatically and basically going effectively to zero in some cases. It's still early, and a lot of this is still being worked out. But one of their key takeaways is that the developers that are jumping into this space early and learning how to work with these tools are going to be the ones that are successful moving forward, because this is sort of going to change the entire development pipeline. So they make a number of predictions. I'm not going to go into all of them in depth here. I would definitely encourage everyone to read the piece. I thought it was really good, and I personally find this topic to be fascinating. But a couple of predictions just off the top that I thought were interesting and connect to the first point here is that they predict we're going to see an increase in the number of games released each year and the emergence of AI-assisted micro studios, maybe some new game types that were not previously possible without generative AI, and of course some forthcoming legal challenges as to use of IP and whatnot, among others. But the sort of TLDR is like, if you're a game developer, you should be looking into generative AI now, as it's still quite early. And this is going to be a marketable skill and a real differentiator for studios. I think, like, if you're a hyper casual studio, you need to be looking into this like yesterday. This is so potentially transformative, I think, to game development. It's just massive. So have you all been following any of the developments in generative AI and what's going on there?
Sure.
Oh, yeah. I see these things every day, and some people post amazing things. Shout out to Eric Befoy, UI presentation veteran in the games industry, always does cool stuff. But then you have all the ones making what looks like someone posted a Belle Delphine, a lot of big boobs, a lot of girls, and some of them are actually some serious stuff, And my take on it, also after watching DeviantArt and other different art pages trying to implement this, that the legal hurdles are so big. At the end of it, this is an algorithm. It's going to take the stuff that being fed, the art is being fed into it, and it's going to try to make something, generate something new with it, and you will always have these legal issues. So at the end of it, for any game studio to be safe, I don't see them using these as their final asset. I see them using maybe as placeholders. Maybe it will help during the process when you're trying to find a reference image. Maybe, for example, designers like myself could actually use it to try to express what I'm looking for to an artist. So it can alleviate some of the stuff, but I think for the foreseeable future, this will only lead to placeholders.
I'm going to disagree. I was at Slush last week, and AI was a hot topic, and I saw some demos of it being used in games already, and they were using a sample set that the artist had created, an in-house artist, so it was creating more art in the same style, and there weren't copyright. It's sort of interesting pushback on from the people building the games, because of course the idea of an AI being able to create a lot of content for the game is not particularly comfortable one to consider, and there's a bit of sort of getting around that. Conversely, I think the people that are building businesses are saying, whoa, this is great. And the investors are also saying, this is awesome. So there's sort of like, depending on who you are, and some people are sort of caught up in the ethics, but I understand as well. But agree with you, Matt. I think it's going to be enormous. We haven't seen a tiny part of it yet. It's got loads more to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think this article is excellent. Also, shout out, Matt, like you did. If you haven't read it, really recommend it, and I'll put it in the show notes. And just reading through it, I got all of these ideas just going through the pipeline of the game that I work on, just thinking, ooh, if we had this, we could do that. And if we had that, we could do this. And not just time savings, but also being able to level up the holistic quality with a smaller team when we're trying to compete with teams that have hundreds of people in it.
Yep.
Yeah, I think you all make some good points, and my takeaway after reading some of the predictions is like, at least one major outcome of this is that it's going to increase the speed at which, especially small developers, are able to put out new games, put out new content, and as they say, it will increase the number of games released each year. So, what does that mean? What are the implications of that? I think that puts the emphasis on discoverability and marketing, which, by the way, could also be impacted by AI in different ways. And I think, to Marie's point, there's also going to be an emphasis on the inputs, the training data. So what is feeding into these models that leads to these new outputs? So rather than just scraping the entire internet, we're using a more specialized set of training data to lead to whatever it is that we're trying to do, whether it's concept art or it's 3D models or textures or what have you.
Yeah, definitely. I used to work in machine learning, and I think the next step to remove the ethical and potential legal issues will be to use internal data sets, like I think you all mentioned. I just one.
I can definitely see that working.
Just one comment. I thought maybe I wanted to bring it up. So I believe one part of the article says that if you're a game studio not utilizing them or exploring them today, that you're already behind. I believe there was a pretty big statement in this article, and I was wondering, Matt, what's your take? Is that realistic? Do you think game studios, if they want to become relevant, they have to start exploring this yesterday?
I think there's probably a little bit of nuance there. Like there are many game studios that are already relevant that are not using it. But I think, from their perspective, from A16Z's perspective, right, they're backing, new studios, startups that need to get to scale quickly. It makes a lot of sense. But to that point, it would be foolish to ignore it if you're a mega publisher or a successful studio already. Like, these changes are coming, whether you want to accept them or not. So I think it makes sense to at least explore it and see what the possibilities are for your own studio, and then decide for yourself. If it's not for you, if you want to be, take a more bespoke approach and do everything in-house, like that's totally acceptable. It's worked for many years. But I think it would be foolish to dismiss it outright without at least investigating it.
And also, if you've already built an art department and that's the way your studio is geared, but you're looking to take a different approach, then you can't just flick a switch and start creating content for your game in a different way. So maybe it's more relevant for startups than it is for existing studios.
I think it's a new set of tools in the tool belt, right? I actually don't think that many people are going to be replaced by these tools. I think it's just going to be, a new set of techniques for creating art or creating content, whatever it may be. Right. It's not only art.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
The industry is growing, where I think we add another billion people in only like 11 years or something like super crazy like that. And so is entertainment and so is games. So, we'll still need all the artists for creation and, polishing if nothing else. So I agree. I don't think a lot of people are going to lose their jobs over this.
And then going into the next update, if we're talking about companies with large data sets to take advantage of being able to create these models, I just want to very quickly run through Embracer Group's earnings. So this was an analysis in Naavik Digest, which is Naavik's free newsletter. It was in collaboration with Invest Game. So their Q2 analysis, main takeaway is that revenue grew 190% year over year. However, Embracer generated only 35% of organic growth, meaning that the remaining growth mostly comes from revenue that's connected to M&A. So nothing surprising based on previous analysis that we've done of Embracer. This is why we're not going to cast judgment yet on their strategy. They have an exciting pipeline in terms of transmedia opportunities with their acquisitions of Asmodee and Dark Horse IPs. They also recently acquired extremely important IPs such as The Lord of the Rings, Tomb Raider, Deus Ex, although unfortunately they are going to sunset the games that, was it Square Enix?
Yeah, they shut down Square Enix Montreal, the mobile studio. They still have the sister studio, Eidos, where I've worked actually, is still intact. And I got a couple of stories from there. If we get time at the end of the show, we'll see. The transformation from a pure PC and console gaming company to multi-pronged entertainment business, where now the tabletop segment is actually 34% of sales, that could help mitigate and have new strategies of growth over the years through their acquisition strategy. Yeah, so we'll keep an eye on that. All right. And then we'll have the last update with you, Matt.
Yeah, so this one is Sony files a patent for tracking in-game digital assets with NFTs. So back in July of this year, Sony had revealed a new loyalty program that they were calling PlayStation Stars, and it allows players to earn points and digital collectibles by completing quote-unquote campaigns. Now, these were referred to as digital rewards, and they were explicitly stated as definitely not NFTs. This is what they said at the time. They could not be resold, this is why they're saying they're not NFTs. However, these seem like very similar topics. So, putting on my tinfoil hat here, like perhaps these are related initiatives. I think my general take here is let's just wait and see. I think, as I said, it's not new news. It's just newly revealed to the public. I think every major game developer, game publisher is looking at Web3 and perhaps making some moves, perhaps just exploring. So, I want to wait and see. The patent hasn't been approved yet, to be clear, and it may not be approved. It does seem very broad if you read through it a little bit. And even if it is approved, how decentralized would it really be? I would assume it'd be somewhat similar to what Ubisoft did with their Quartz initiative. It's going to be still within Sony's ecosystem if they do it. They're not going to, I'm assuming, they're not going to open their digital collectibles up to Xbox or Nintendo or what have you. So maybe I'm being overly skeptical, but my take is wait and see.
Matt, what's the difference between what you just described there and trophies? Is it more on the sort of collectible sides, or?
I don't know that there's a huge difference. They mentioned, where was it? It was gameplay clips, characters, or in-game items. So it's not just like a little trophy you put on your shelf, but it could be, a clip that you took while you were playing God of War, or, you're collecting some in-game items. I don't know. It's obviously light on details, but this is
okay. I'm not a huge fan of people trademarking things that are sort of already going on already. We've seen that in the games industry a few times, where something that's already basically in the public domain, somebody then somehow managed to get a trademark on it and everybody has to react to it. Feels a bit like that. As you say, I guess it's happened a while ago, but stinks a bit, I think.
I think you're 100% right, David. This is something that really big companies do because they have the resources to file patents and go through all the legal proceedings and defend those patents if they're granted, right? So this is not something that some Web3 startup can just spin up and file a patent for NFTs.
I remember I was making games for Sony at one point, and I was encouraged to make trademarks. I think we even got a studio bonus for if we're doing something cool and new, then let's wrap this up in a trademark and then protect it. Didn't like that.
I worked for IBM for a while, and their whole business was basically patents. I was in this Almaden research lab with people who had 30 patents to their name each, or worked there for like 35 plus years or something like that. So some do that, but the crutch here, like one of you mentioned, is like once you have them, you have to defend them. And that's going to cost you a lot of money as well. That's something you need to keep doing, because as soon as you stop, then everyone can say, well, you let these guys do it, so why can't we do it,
Interesting.
And the question is if it will actually be approved or not, because this is an area that's moving very quickly.
Yeah, I don't think it will be approved for
even if
all
it
the mentioned reasons.
Yeah,
it's quite a slow process. It takes multiple years to get these things approved, and they only filed it last year.
Mm-hmm. I actually don't know how it could be enforced if the blockchain is decentralized.
Yeah, none of this. What are you doing bringing this story, Matt? This is a complete non-story. Next story, come on.
Big nothing burger.
Sorry, Matt.
It's okay.
Well, this is great. This is honest feedback. Okay, then we'll go into the first discussion topic, which is Blizzard not renewing NetEase. I'm not one for gossip, so I will stay away from gossip. But if you want to go into gossip, David, you're the guest. You're welcome.
I don't have a lot, but I can speculate. But why don't we start with the facts, and then we'll speculate and dig into gossip.
Okay. I did notice yesterday when I was doing the prep, I have 3 bullet points of facts, and then all the rest is gossip. So
Perfect.
there's something going on.
Let's do it.
Okay. So I think just starting from the conclusion, Blizzard Games will return to China. It will be with a new partner. It could be with the former partner. We'll see. So we're going to digging into with whom and when. So setting the scene of what happened, the publishing license in mainland China will not be renewed in the agreement between Blizzard and NetEase in January next year. This means that games like World of Warcraft, Overwatch, Hearthstone, Diablo 3, Warcraft 3, and others will no longer be accessible. They're essentially shutting down in the country. I believe because you associate your Blizzard account to account systems in China, such as WeChat, I believe, you will have your progress saved. So hopefully, if they do bring it back, you're not going to lose your progress. And before going into the rumors, so Blizzard's public statement was that the contract was not consistent with Blizzard's operating principles and commitments to players and employees. Doesn't say much. And then NetEase publicly stated that it was because there were material differences on key terms and we could not reach an agreement. There was a mysterious tweet, though, to kick off all of these rumors, where NetEase's head of partnerships appeared to call Blizzard's CEO, Bobby Kotick, a jerk. Although, you know, all stories have two sides.
Who doesn't? Is that news?
I'm not going to pass judgment.
Is there anyone who doesn't think this?
So let's start with the rumors. Not really rumors yet. So yeah, what are the consequences for Blizzard and NetEase? Because both companies really played down the impact that this was going to have onto their performance. Activision Blizzard's stock value remained stable, whilst NetEase's took a bit of a dive. What do you think?
So I think that like Blizzard is fine, you know, they'll find someone else to release this with, and they still have so strong IPs and so semi-unique games in some regards. I think that they'll be fine. NetEase, they have so much other stuff going on, so many other games that I think in the long term they will be fine as well. But you know, looking at the kind of share value moving, it does seem they took a little bit of a bigger hit, and that does make sense.
Can I point of clarity, Maria? What's happened there? That they had an agreement and then it needed to be renewed? Because from the language you use there, it says, they're not happy with the contract. But presumably there was a contract before that, and so even though that the arrangement was commercially okay, the new agreement didn't work for both sides. Is that what you read into that?
Yes, the contract had an expiry date, and then they had to negotiate the renewal. And my understanding is that the terms that were trying to be negotiated for the renewal, there was no agreement. And so they decided to not renew it, which means that when the expiration date hits, the games can no longer...
You would think that Blizzard had the leverage there because, as Marie says, right, they'll find someone else. So it was interesting that they were being pushed against. Anyway.
I found some rumors.
It sounds that's what happened. They probably were trying to use that, right, to get a better deal for the extension.
I found some rumors. I found a rumor of what they were trying to negotiate. Again,
this is good.
Rumors, but we'll get into it. I can see why NetEase did not accept it. We'll see. Any other thoughts on the consequences before we move on?
I just want the gossip.
I want the rumors. Yeah, I want to hear
this. Well, one thing that I would say though is like, if Blizzard would partner with someone else, then what would that be? Because NetEase has a big presence in all of Asia, especially in China. And the question is, like, they have the marketing potential that not everyone else does. So they're able to really, like, Blizzard has the IP, and they're famous and they're good games, but you still need to reach in terms of, reaching the clients. And that's what I think that NetEase could bring. So who else could bring enough of that for Blizzard, so to say, for it to be worth it for them to make the move?
Yeah, I think the obvious choice would be Tencent, because Microsoft and Activision already have relationships with previous projects and existing projects. However, there are other contenders in play. What's the name? For example, the company that used to be the partner in mainland China before NetEase. I have to go and look up what the name is.
I'll look it up while you keep going.
And then,
but Tencent, they have their own games too, are they gonna?
Yeah, I think so, definitely, because it's part of Tencent's. It's just part of Tencent's business. They do that for many, many games, and with these strong partnerships.
That hasn't stopped Tencent in the past.
Yeah,
right.
And they also have. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, you're okay. I was gonna say, they have a relationship with Activision to do Call of Duty, but Tencent also does PUBG Mobile and several other shooters. I don't think they're worried about cannibalizing their own revenues too much.
No, and they also have co-dev opportunities and third-party dev opportunities with, I believe they have 5 studios for development, but one of them is Timmy that did Honor of Kings. They also did Call of Duty Mobile. So some potential consequences that were discussed was whether this would limit opportunities of co-dev for Blizzard because they did co-dev with NetEase for Diablo Immortal. Oh yeah, I didn't mention Diablo Immortal is safe because it has its own contract, so it's not going to shut down in mainland China. So there's also that potential relationship. The other player that they could sign an agreement with could be Nuverse from ByteDance.
Okay.
At least when we get into what they're asking for, I think you'd have to find a partner that has deep pockets and wants to take the name, get the marketing, get the reputation of having such agreements. Yeah, we'll get into it.
But ByteDance doesn't have any publishing capability, does it, in China?
They do with Nuverse. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
They did Marvel Snap. They published Marvel Snap.
Oh, really? Okay. I didn't know there. Okay.
Yeah, so they're trying to get that reputation and market standing. So having an agreement with Blizzard could take them that way. But yes, they don't have the history or the operational capacity when comparing to NetEase and Tencent, at least nowadays.
Yep. What were the terms?
What were the terms? Okay, let me
spill the beans.
Let me find them. So again, these are rumors. The terms were that Blizzard was trying to have the share ratio increased compared with more than 50% of revenue and net profit during the contract period from 2019 to 2022. They're also they wanted NetEase to develop other IP mobile games for Blizzard's global distribution, but only have the revenue share for the Chinese market. And NetEase would have to pay a deposit. Additionally, because there's a game approval problem in China, I think Blizzard was trying to put forward some clauses that just could not be guaranteed based on the regulatory environment in China. And that would put NetEase in quite a disadvantaged position. And additionally, NetEase would have to pay 2 years of corporation money in advance, which would be millions.
Wow.
And considering that there was a huge slowdown in terms of licenses being granted by the regulatory bodies in China for the distribution of games there, that's a huge gamble, because you might pay those 2 years up front without really knowing when your license will be granted. Yeah. So you'll just be out of pocket without you having control over it.
Yep.
Yeah, but on the positive side, we have seen quite recently Tencent finally had their first game license approved. I believe it was a week or so ago, called Metal Slug Awakening. And we've also seen NetEase also get a couple game licenses approved. So at least that risk, it's not fully mitigated, but at least there's some signs that the environment is improving. What do you think of those conditions?
It's hard to know. I mean, I agree that sounds like puts a lot of risk on NetEase's side if they're paying for things up front, but not sure whether or not they can start seeing revenue streams from it. So it's hard to... It sort of depends what the rev share is, right? So as to whether or not some of those other things are fair, it's hard to work out without knowing the numbers, I think.
I think Blizzard certainly has the leverage in this negotiation. They have the IPs here. And I think, if they were dissatisfied with the agreement to begin with, perhaps, obviously these are rumors, but perhaps they put forth terms that they knew would be rejected so that they could go out and, court other publishers.
Right. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like something they wouldn't have done unless they had a good alternative in place, right? Because otherwise they're gambling as well, because every month that their games are not live in this region, they're losing a lot of money.
There are two rumors about that. I really went into the rabbit hole of rumors on this one. So one of the rumors is that actually Tencent has been in conversations with Blizzard for a year. So they could have been preparing for this. The second rumor is that Blizzard could do an agreement with NetEase again, because it seems like Bobby Kotick maybe was an instigator here that was potentially not all of Blizzard being aligned on what was being pursued. Mm-hmm. And so there's a rumor that if the acquisition with Microsoft goes through and they assign a new CEO, that then we could actually see Blizzard go back and do an agreement with NetEase again, because that will really mitigate the risk in terms of the approval, because the approval is with the agent company and not with Blizzard. So if they go with any company that's not NetEase, they'll be at risk of the regulatory environment of getting that license approved. Mm-hmm. But if they're with NetEase, they could just turn it back on if they wanted to.
It might be the bad cop, good cop, they're sending Bobby, see how far he can get. And then they come like, okay, we'll meet you halfway. And then that's still more than what they would have gotten otherwise hadn't they done that maneuver, so to say.
When was the last NetEase mobile game? Was that Diablo 3? Was that the last one they did? Oh no, Call of Duty?
They did a Diablo Immortal game.
That's the one I meant. Sorry, when was that? That wasn't that long ago, was it?
No, I don't think it was that long that it was granted to be published.
I'm just wondering whether or not they waited for everything to be wrapped up on some big games like that before going to a negotiation.
Essentially, Diablo Immortal is protected in a different contract, so it wouldn't have been affected. But it would be the future games. Just some of the things I thought would be interesting to dig into just before moving on is whether it will actually become easier to publish a game in the People's Republic of China. I know that it's an attractive market. There's a lot of potential, especially with certain game genres. Although the environment of actually getting published, you need a local partner, or you need a local partner, and then you need a license, and there's just a lot of difficulties that as an overhead, especially if you're a smaller studio. But it seems, I think the state media did a recent acknowledgement of the value of the opportunity of games, and that they want to really help push forward realizing that opportunity. And also we've seen we've seen the European Union pass, it's not a law, it's a resolution, so it's not binding, where they're calling on the member states to try to support the growth of the game industry. And as soon as that resolution passed, a few days later, we saw that Germany is increasing their national budget for games funding. We saw that Ireland is implementing a tax credit of 32%, where you can claim back 32% of development costs. And so we know that China also has ambitions to lead the global development of technology. They want to be the leaders of AI by 2030. And so I think seeing how other countries are really investing into the industry, that might soften their position, because there was a bit of crackdown. I believe a few years ago. There was a crackdown before, and then it got better, and then there was a crackdown again due to the addiction. But they also recently made an announcement that they've managed to resolve young people's addiction to games through their regulations. So overall, it could be important for companies to keep an eye on what's happening in the market, because maybe that softening could mean the opportunity is there to try to enter it.
It's very hard for Western companies to really understand what goes on in Eastern countries. I found that in the past working at EA, trying to make headway into Japan, and it's just very, very hard to do without pairing with a company, partnering with a company that really understands the domestic market. And I can't, culturally and commercially and the way the government works, I have no idea how to navigate that. So,
and it's not just in games. That's right.
And my experience working for both Square Enix when I worked at IDOS and later Capcom Vancouver is that there's just different cultures going on, and understanding each other takes quite a while. It takes a couple of years, and the best thing you can do is probably just to purchase or partner with someone who seems obviously successful in their market and just let them be. And that's kind of the only thing I've seen working long term, really. And even that doesn't work forever. So I think there'll always be those cultural differences to try to understand. And for Western companies, there'll be some suspicion. Japan, I feel like it's a little bit of a better story. Like there's a tradition within games, especially coined by Square and Nintendo, to have these partnerships with China. It's still up there, and with having the state being such a liability, not knowing what they're going to go next, when they crack down. It's hard to talk about this without getting political. It was the Hong Kong, it was COVID, it was, limiting how much you can play. I think this is a pattern that is recurring, and I think it will continue to happen. I think that will continue being a risk. Yeah,
it's about measuring the risk versus the opportunity of entering a completely new market. And when I used to work in fisheries doing export-import globally, we always needed to have local partners for sales in different countries because we don't understand how sales happen. We don't understand interpersonal relationships, or how you position a product in Iceland or the United States is different to how you're going to position your product in China, in South Korea, in Japan. And yeah, I think we see that in games as well. You need someone who understands the market to guide how to position your product there. All right, we'll move into the next discussion topic, which is about Google's deals.
Yeah, so the headline here is that Google struck a number of deals to prevent competition with their Play Store. And the thing I'd like you all to keep in mind as I'm sort of going through this, just think about, like, do you think that this is anti-competitive, or do you think that it's just good strategy on Google's part? So the headline here, Google has struck at least 24 deals with various big app developers to stop them from competing with the Play Store. So this came out from, again, lawsuit that Epic Games filed against Google 2020, alleging anti-competitive practices related to Android and the Play Store. And Google had entered into agreements with companies like Activision Blizzard, $360 million over 3 years, Riot Games in 2020, $30 million for 1 year, to basically not go develop their own app stores. Google was worried. This apparently came from an internal, I don't know if it was a presentation or memo from their finance team, stating the potential downside if this sort of movement to break away from the app stores caught momentum. And they were seeing, potential massive financial implications on Google. And so they started cutting these deals. So Activision has denied the claims. Riot said they're still reviewing the filing. Other companies that were supposedly caught into this web were Nintendo, Ubisoft, Calm, which is a meditation app, and Age of Learning, which I think is educational games. So some interesting names there. The remuneration included payments. I don't know if this was for all of them, but certainly for Activision specifically, they talked about payments for posting to YouTube, credits towards Google Ads and cloud services. They were sort of cutting different deals to make it more appealing for these publishers to not go do their own thing. This was all a part of what was called Project Hug. And yeah, I thought it was a fun name. Project Hug. Yeah, they want to hug the developers and bring them closer in Google's loving arms.
Wow.
And make sure that they don't go build their own apps.
This is like the hug from your grandma who almost suffocates you when you were 3 and you still have trauma from it.
Yeah. I guess the question is I'm trying to keep the analogy going here. Is your grandmother's hug anti-competitive to other grandmothers, or is it just out of love and concern?
It's two grandmothers, right? So they're competing, so they gotta make sure you remember them. No, just kidding. I have a take on this. I think this is a bribe, like straight up bribe, obviously, and I think it is anti-competitive on the one hand, but on the other hand, this is a deal. There's two sides of the deal. They could also just say no and move ahead and make their own store if they wanted to take the risk. But obviously all these companies are just taking the money, and they're like, well, it's not worth the risk going off making my own store, and trying to fight this dragon. So I'll just take the money and be happy with it.
I think that's a really interesting take because, Google has the perspective, 30,000 feet, they can see all the companies that could potentially take this path or join forces and team up against the App Store. But if you're just, Calm, or you're just Nintendo, you're not necessarily having these conversations with other companies that might not be like directly competitive doing these App Stores. So it's like much riskier for the people that they're. It's easier, as you say, Marie, to cut the deal and take the money than it is to go out and take a risk to build your own app store and compete against Google, this behemoth.
Now, you can't. I'm just trying to think how this would work. So you're not allowed to build a store that you can download from the app store. You can't have a store within the store. So is this obviously Fortnite was sideloaded? So that's I think what they were reacting to first. Is there also an issue that Samsung and Huawei at least used to have their own stores, and they got some sort of, what is that, sort of baked into their phone when you buy it. It has.
That's right.
So what do you think? Is it to prevent both of those? And maybe if you're saying, hey, don't build a store for 3 years, if legislation went against Google and it was decided that actually people can have a store on the phone, then it sort of prevents them from doing it, even though it would become easy and wouldn't, or much easier. So, do you think they're trying to protect against all three of those, or is there one in particular?
Well, certainly Samsung was mentioned in the research that I was doing. I think Fortnite had cut a deal with Samsung at the time to have Fortnite on the Samsung store or something like that.
Right.
And so they were concerned, Google was concerned that other developers might follow suit. I don't know if they were concerned about Samsung specifically, or, some of these companies that cut deals could feasibly compete. I think Nintendo, Activision Blizzard, like these companies have major IP. They have a lot of games. They could potentially compete. But if you talk about some of these smaller players, then maybe Google is concerned about Samsung. They're concerned about Huawei or what have you.
And I worked a little bit on stores at one point, and there's a critical mass point as well, because if the top 20 grossing or most downloaded games all of a sudden were available in another app store, I think you don't go to another app store just for one game, but if all of the major ones are there and they give you some sort of incentive as a player, where they say, do you know what, starting we'll give you a $3 pack for free or 30% off or whatever they can afford for not giving that to Google, then it might be enough of a critical mass to have players start to get in the habit of opening a different store other than the Google Play Store.
Well, if we're talking about Activision Blizzard with Candy Crush, that's a massive market to move into the App Store. And with Android, it is a little bit different from Apple, where you can download APKs and install them. You can, I think even on Apple, you can almost sideload apps and it creates a web app. So it kind of looks like an app, but you download it in a different way. So
I thought it was interesting that Fortnite ultimately ended up back on the Google Play Store. So that sideloading experiment, I remember trying that to see what that was like, and there was a lot of friction, as you imagine.
I tried it as well at the time.
Yeah, and ultimately Epic decided, they weren't forced to, they just decided we're losing too many installs by not being on the Google Play Store. So that sideloading there's just too much friction there. So.
I think they needed a little bit more, right? I think what Google needs to do is not to bribe every single one, just bribe enough of them so that there's not enough critical mass for them to kind of go together and do something alone. And one thing that might have spurred Google on is like looking at what happened to Netflix and what's happening with the TV streaming right now. Whereas first everyone was on Netflix, and then everyone decided Netflix is making so much money off of our IPs. And now you have Disney Plus, you have Hulu, you have everyone is, HBO, everyone's doing their own network. So probably Google's looking at what's happening over there and decided we just need to put enough wrenches into the market to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I agree.
It does feel anti-competitive. What makes me wince a bit there is that there's the big players get, 360 million? Is that what you said? And that's a nice, if that's Google ad spend budget and you're up against, as a small independent developer, or frankly, not one of the 24 that was listed, right? You're now trying to compete with somebody that's got $360 million of ad spend that doesn't have to worry quite so much about the CPIs anymore. And it's tough enough as it is without that sort of advantage going to the major game makers.
I will mention one thing out of this, about the anti-competitiveness. I hadn't thought about, it is anti-competitive in the terms that you're giving out the free money to a couple of developers, probably not every, game developer out there. So those people have the big advantage, of course, to their games. But I think in the end, to the actual gamers, I'm not sure this has a big impact, because I'm guessing if there even was a competitive app store being opened up on Android, they would probably take they wouldn't make lower prices for the consumers. They wouldn't make different or better games. They would just take a bigger share to themselves into their pocket. So I think at the end of the day, for the gamers, this is not really anti-competitive.
Maybe we don't know that. I think one of the things that Epic was doing, at least with their Epic Game Store, is taking a lower share of revenues, right? So it's certainly theoretically possible that Nintendo or Activision Blizzard or whoever could set up their own store and take a smaller cut in an effort to attract more developers to their platform? We don't know. I do agree with the take that it's like the rich get richer. They get these sort of, they cut these deals with Google, they get the credits towards ad spend, and like, I don't know that Activision Blizzard really needs that help. But they're in such a powerful position to where they get that deal offered to them in the first place.
No, I'd say when it comes to Epic, one needs to remember that, yes, they are, taking a lower cost in their store, but they're also making money off of Unreal, off of the platform itself. And if it was true that, publishers wouldn't, up the price when they could, then all the digital copies of games would cost less than the physical ones because the distribution cost went down. But that never happened, right? Or not really.
Yeah, and we look at, I believe it's Empires and Puzzles. They released a web shop recently where they're selling the hard currency at a lower price than compared to buying on the platform. Because a 30% chunk, you still have space to give your player base a discount and take a lot home from giving that discount. So personally, I think we're going to see more and more of it unless we see some changes in terms of the regulations in the stores. And I was looking at the data of Activision Blizzard, how much they took away in the past year in terms of their Android. And it was about 830 million. So if we look at 360 million across 3 years, probably worth it. Not have the technical overhead of developing the store, the marketing overhead of trying to get players to know it exists and going into it.
And in all of those cases, it probably wasn't. I doubt they were actually building a store, so it's just free money, right? It's not like, we were going to make a load of money from building a store and circumventing a 30% hardware fee. But we'll take this one, which is no, they weren't doing it anyway. They were just carrying on trucking, probably, right? And then Google said, "How about some free money for not doing anything, just continuing to do what you're doing?" That's a nice email to get.
It can be used to build a war chest to later go ahead and do it once you don't want to sign a paper anymore.
Wow.
So it's just business.
I look in terms of whether it's anti-competitive or not. I think if it's called Project Hug and no one is willing to admit that they took the money, I'm not saying it's illegal or anti-competitive, but it definitely feels suspicious if you're not comfortable to publicly state that you did take this deal. Additionally, I looked into the anti-competitive rules in terms of the UK, and it says that you cannot agree with other businesses to share markets or customers. You'll be breaking competition law if you agree with another business to not compete with them for customers.
But this is to start something that you don't have yet, which I feel like is a different case. Because you could also say, we're just not doing it because we don't want to take the risk,
It's legally, I think it's just a deal. It's just business. Ethically, it stinks a bit, and rich get richer. So, and Google, I don't know, like to have a reputation. Used to be "Don't be evil," right? And I'm sure they wouldn't be happy about this policy being known to all those independent developers that they try and, they do their events, don't they, where everyone gets together and let's help the little guy out. It certainly flies in the face of that, doesn't it?
Do you have any other takes, Matt, for this topic?
Well, I mean, similar to what David just said, it's interesting that this happened to Google on the Android platform, which is kind of more open than Apple. Like, I don't think Apple would ever do this. They would just be like, good luck, making your own app store. You're not going to be allowed on our store, and we have all the Apple devices. So I just kind of think it's an interesting outcome, or I don't know, just like fact of life, that because Google is taking this open strategy with the Android platform, this could be a result. Whereas I don't think it would ever happen to Apple.
Yeah, but unless legislation falls against them and Google, right? And that's really not impossible. I mean, that's exactly what the Epic. Well, one of the things the Epic lawsuit is testing, right? It's how come we don't get to sell things directly? If we, why can't we build our own store? So at the moment, that's not going Google. That's not going Epic's way right now, basically. But it's not over yet, is it?
Yeah, and I think whether it's Apple or Google, I think the sort of general, let's say, legislative momentum is towards pushing back on these policies, pushing back on the 30% cut. And I think they know that, but they are willing to spend all sorts of money to delay it as much as possible, whether it's Project Hug or other things, because they make far more money from their current situation. That it's like, this is a drop in the bucket for Google. So they'd be happy to sort of delay any sort of opening up of the ecosystem as long as possible.
Mm.
So yeah, the takeaway of this episode is lots of rumors, and hopefully we'll see them confirmed.
A year from now, we realize we were all wrong.
Wait a second though. Matt's story about Google and the handouts, is that rumor or is that fact? It sounded like it's fact.
That's fact, yeah. Project Hug is a real thing. This was previously revealed, and it was, I think, only recently came out more details about who was involved and the numbers and whatnot. But I think even back to last year, we knew about Project Hug.
I thought no company that was part of the deal had acknowledged that they did take this deal.
I don't know that anyone has acknowledged it. Any of the recipients have acknowledged it, but I think it's generally public knowledge that Project Hug is a real thing. It was revealed in these court filings. It's just that no one has sort of acknowledged taking the handout.
Right.
It seems there's a lot of secrecy around both these trials. Some stuff we learn, but all the companies involved, because everyone has ties with both Google and Apple, right? Everyone wants it to be kind of secret. They don't want any more of their deals or anything to be out in the limelight. But on the second hand, it's hard to deny this publicly if someone catches the rumor of it all, because then maybe eventually the court will ask them for the actual details, and are they going to lie publicly? Like that might come back to bite them later on.
I don't think you get to do that. You can't. Well, I see. Yeah, I see what you mean. To the public, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if you have an angle on this, let us know in the comments of the episode. You can find us on YouTube. Also, if you want to help us reach a broader audience, if you could give us a like and also subscribe. And yeah, we appreciate you joining us, and we hope to see you next week.